Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm sitting with a dear friend, Wes Hagen, who is the winemaker and brand ambassador for the Miller Family Wine Company. We're in Santa Maria. Wes, I'm so excited to have you here. Many people might know you from your days at Clos Pepe, but you have a huge role now, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about what Miller Family Wine Company means.
Correct. After finishing the 2014 vintage at Clos Pepe, which was my last there, I bottled that wine in August of 2015 and then came over to the Miller Family Wine Company permanently to be the winemaker for J. Wilkes Wines, where I was for 5 vintages. After the 2019 vintage, I transitioned to the Miller Family Wine Company to be the consulting winemaker for all of our brands, which include Barrel Burner, Ballard Lane, Smashberry, and J. Wilkes. I still have a very soft spot in my heart for J. Wilkes because it's something that I was part of it. Jonathan Nagy, previously 20 years at Byron Winery, has now taken over as the official winemaker for J. Wilkes, but I get to go in and help blend and put in sort of my 2 cents and my bully pulpit when we put these wines together for everything we do at the Miller Family Wine Company.
Yeah, because you have 2 cents to add.
I always do. Yes, I do have. I like to consider myself a collaborative winemaker in the sense that I trust the people around me, and as opposed to at Clos Pepe, where it was just my wife and I doing pretty much all the work with our interns. I have people now, and some of them are far more talented as far as their craft of their winemaking, and so now I kind of get to come in, taste the wines as they're fermented, maybe taste some fruit before it comes in, and really hopefully put a little stamp on the wine. But honestly, these wines would be delicious with or without me, which is a weird thing to say, right? As a craftsperson.
No, you took your ego out of it.
It's a rare thing, but once in a while it happens.
Well, tell me, under the company, how many cases of wine are you producing? Or maybe tell me by category.
We are trying to hit about 70,000 cases of finished case goods this year. But you have to remember that we own 2,400 acres of vineyard, including, get ready for this, Bien Nacido, the most vineyard-designated property on the planet Earth, produces more vineyard-designated wine than any vineyard in the world. Solomon Hills, probably the best Chardonnay outside of Clos Pepe in the Santa Barbara County, as well as French Camp Vineyard up in the Paso Robles Highlands District, which is another 1,400 acres. So 900 acres planted at Bien Nacido, 100 acres at Solomon Hills, and then 1,400 acres. So we're 2,400 acres planted in the ground. We sell a lot of fruit. We sell a lot of bulk wine. We sell a lot of private label, control label. We make wine for everyone from Landry's Steakhouse to Total Wine and more. And but we're really trying to focus now on getting our case goods up to 100,000 cases direct sales of those wines.
And that's of course across all the brands, because for an area like Santa Barbara County, that's very big, but we're not talking about one brand here. We're talking about a handful. So you mentioned all the acres you have, and I'm curious, across the board, what grape varieties are you working with?
Well, I would say I would go to our best. Mm-hmm. So if I'm talking about Bien Nacido, this might surprise you, but to me, the greatest grapes that are grown at Bien Nacido were Chardonnay number 1, Syrah number 2, and the grape you thought I was going to mention, Pinot Noir number 3. Not to say that Pinot Noir isn't absolutely world class. It is. But the Chardonnay, I think, might be in Santa Maria Valley. It's the best grape we grow. The Syrah is a showstopper. And the Pinot Noir, maybe if I had never tasted a Bien Nacido Pinot Noir and I tasted it, I would say this is the greatest grape that we grow. But, familiarity being what it is, right. I think the Pinot Noir is absolutely world class. But if you've never had a Chardonnay out of the Santa Maria Valley, there we go. I'm conflicted. Chardonnay out of the Santa Maria Valley or the Santa Rita Hills, or a Syrah from those cool climate Region 1 Winkler zones. These wines are absolutely stunning.
Yeah. And of course, making as much as you do, are you available in all markets and anything overseas?
Absolutely. So we're right now doing some Korea, Japan, Norway, Sweden, Canada. We are making the official wine for the Calgary Flames, for example. So Will Costello, Master Sommelier, is now really dabbling into our export market, and our exports are going off just kind of gangbusters. And not only the Bien Nacido and Solomon Hills wines, which are traditional nationally some of the highest scoring wines across all major wine publications in Santa Barbara. We're making amazing estate wines there, but that's not my business. That's Will's business. But as far as the other labels that I mentioned for the Miller Family Wine Company, these wines are really starting to show up in foreign markets. And now I believe we are 46 out of 50 states. We're basically going to be full national distribution this year.
Wow. Well, I'm sipping the J. Wilkes Blanc de Blanc right now, so anywhere in the world that you can get that, I recommend it. Tell me, what is your first memory relevant to wine?
I would say that when I was 9 years old, I was doing dishes at a dinner party for my mom, who had brought some of her law firm over to do a gourmet club, which was a dinner party that you'd actually serve pâté at and maybe have some fine wine. And a gentleman named Steve Pepe was there, who was a senior partner at my mom's law firm, but totally unrelated to me then. He would end up marrying my wife after my parents marrying my. I just went a little Freudian. I apologize. Marrying my mom after my dad and my mom divorced. But Steve Pepe, I was doing dishes basically to make quarters to go play asteroids at the 7-Eleven up the street. And Steve came into the kitchen and saw me on a stool doing the dishes and put down a glass with maybe two ounces of red wine. And it was a very interesting color. And he said, now I'm not saying a 9-year-old should be drinking wine, but that's a 71 Latour. And it would be a shame if that wine went down the drain. I didn't know what 71 was. I didn't know what Latour was. But there was something, it was sort of like when you're at church and you're told to be quiet and you see everyone's really serious about it, you're quiet. You sit there and do tic-tac-toe, in a Bible or something.
Uh-huh.
I'm going sacrilegious as quickly as I can. But that moment was my ability to taste one of the greatest wines in the world. And my brother tasted it and said, yuck. And I tasted it and said, whoa. So there was something there. There was something special. It was like hearing a Shakespearean sonnet or something. There was something far more complex than my little brain could grok. But my goodness, it put me in a place where, so I like to say I went through my Bordeaux phase at 9, then did some Rhones in my early tweens, and then ready to jump right into Burgundy by the time I went to college. And honestly, I was so lucky to have Steve and my dad and my mom being as permissive as they would to allow me to see and to watch them model proper drinking behavior. Mm-hmm. So I never had to learn by drinking 8 beers and getting sick behind the high school auditorium. I had already learned how to drink, how to eat, how to talk, and how to be part of eating and drinking culture really early in my life.
Well, so it's not fair that your first wine was a 71 Latour, even if you didn't appreciate it.
Vintage.
But you clearly have a good pedigree of wines that you were introduced to, and you were very fortunate to have the people introducing it to you. So I know you've drunk a lot of great wine. I've had the privilege of drinking some of that with you. I'm sure not to the degree you're used to, but I'm always happy to drink wine with you. But of all the wines you've tasted, is there one wine that stands out as sort of an aha moment for you? Not when you were 9 years old, but more in developing either your style, your palate, your philosophy. What was it and what was the occasion?
The occasion was the first night I was in Burgundy. I was 26 years old. I'd yet to meet my wife. I was single. I'd never been to Burgundy in my life. We were at the Rotisserie de Chambertin.
And you weren't a winemaker at the time either?
I was just started to be a wine grower. This was the first year I was managing Clos Pepe. I had made a couple homemade wines, but I would not consider myself a winemaker. This is the moment I became a winemaker. Okay. At the Rotisserie de Chambertin, we looked at the list, we talked to the owner. It was actually during Clinton's impeachment trial, and the French owner was like, this man, Clinton, he must be very busy. We do the same thing, but we have a house in the country. He does it in his office. He must be an excellent president. Anyways, he said, tonight, I think for the money, if I were you guys, I would do the 72 Louis Trapet Chapelle Chambertin Grand Cru. And he brought this bottle and opened it in front of us, had no label, just hand-chalked bottle, and opened the bottle because the owner of the rotisserie actually owned part of the many of the Grand Crus in Chambertin. So he La Trissier and as well as Mazy Chambertin, and then this wine. And so he took the La Trissier and brought it open, and he opened the bottle. He poured himself like 4 ounces out of this 80 euro bottle, and we were kind of looking at him. And he swirled it, not just a taste. I mean, it was a glass of our wine. But dude, it was 75, 80 euros. So who cares? So he swirled it and he smelled it and he said, oh, it's like saying hello to an old friend. Wow. And of course, that's French people, whatever you'd say. I wanted to smell it. So I remember this was the seminal moment. This was my introduction to the deeper wisdom of what Pinot Noir and Burgundy could do. And I stuck my nose in it. It was fruity and smoky and earthy. It was like smelling this beautiful, perfect, like meat grilling on a perfect fire with earth and fruit. And it struck something in me emotionally, and I began to weep. And I don't know why, but I started to cry. And I remember my mom looking at me, are you okay? And I'm like, oh my God, this wine. And then I tasted it, and it delivered. How in the world could something smell that complex? And I had heard about complexity in wine. I'd written about complexity in wine. I had never tasted this amount of flavors that were not only on the edge of perception, they were sublime, but they were perfectly balanced. And it's like that wine waited for that moment to turn me into a winemaker. And the craziest thing was that I came back to the United States and everyone's like, oh, so what did you learn in Burgundy now that you want to be a winemaker? What drove you? I said, not a damn thing. What Burgundy taught me is Burgundy only applies in Burgundy. If I try to apply winemaking techniques, if I try to apply viticultural techniques from Burgundy, that's the wrong point. The correct way to leave Burgundy is to leave Burgundy when you leave. And to say, when you eat that airplane lamb, I'm not in France anymore. Certainly I'm not in France anymore. I'm on a United flight. And when I get back, I want to learn to make the best wine I can in the Santa Maria Valley, Santa Rita Hills. These are the things that drove me. It's sort of like reading Shakespeare. I'm not going to write an iambic pentameter specifically. I'm going to read Ovid. I'm not going to write in dactylic hexameter or heroic couplets. But damn it, by knowing that, I'm going to write better free verse because I've read the classics, and now I'm going to break the classics apart. I'm going to take them apart and put them together in a modern or postmodern format that allows me to make the best wine where I am. So Burgundy taught me that Burgundy doesn't have a damn thing to do with California. And any winemaker who says they make Burgundian style Pinot Noir, I won't drink their wine. I mean, maybe I will, but I think they missed the whole point, that Pinot Noir represents a place, and Burgundy is Burgundy, and California is California.
Well, speaking of places, and you've traveled and obviously drunk some damn good wine, who do you think gets to drink the best in terms of quality around the world?
I think Jim Clendenin at Au Bon Climat. Have you ever seen his recycling bin?
No.
First time I looked in his recycling bin, I counted no less than 45 bottles of Grand Cru. Think about the price. I mean, honestly, today, a bottle of Grand Cru probably averages $1,000. He had a Porsche in his recycling bin, and it was in his liver, and he did not give, one of those things. He really... So basically, it's not what country or what place. One single human being drinks the best quality wine in the world. I mean,
I love it.
Here's the problem. The French are so passionate about their own wine. I mean, literally, if you're born in France, you get every AOC delivered to your brain through the embryonic fluid, the same way that a Brit would know every Beatles lyric through their embryonic fluid, right? So it's like you say the black wine of Cahors, a 3-year-old French person is going to tell you it's Malbec.
Right.
So I want to say the French people, as far as vin de plaisir, vin de garde, they kind of had the idea of wines to drink for fun, wines to drink that are serious. I kind of think like the French probably at the highest end eat the best food and the wine in the world, but I got to go to Italy for everyday quality of what they put on the plate and what they put in the glass. Now that they're cleaning up their wines, I think Italy can make a lot of dirty wines, but I think that's changing. And I think the terroir of the entire wine world, whether you're talking Greece, Turkey, Armenia, whether you're talking about France or Germany. Germany's always made clean wine. Sure. They're an outlier because they're Zero Salva. They're all about making clean wine. Right. The French are being pushed by Americans. The Italians are being pushed by Americans in post-prohibition proper winemaking techniques taught by University of Davis, California Davis. They really managed to make our wine squeaky clean. Now we're backing a little bit off from that, but I think Europe is taking this idea that if you don't make a clean wine, you're not going to get a good score in the magazine.
Absolutely. And now let me clarify, clean wine not being the marketing term of clean wine, like who knows what that means, but clean, define clean very briefly. You don't mean clean like no additives. You mean clean.
I mean your cellar is not rife with lactobacillus and Brettanomyces.
Exactly.
I don't believe that bacterial infection in a wine is necessarily terroir, like the French have been trying to teach us for 100 years. Now that Burgundy is starting to show some ozone machines and some clean cellars, we are having to reevaluate what the difference between, the Côte de Nuit and the Côte de Bon and all the areas on the RN74. These wines are becoming brand new because we've never tasted clean Burgundy before.
Right. So let me ask you. You got to grow up with a mom and a dad and a stepdad who drank really good wine and shared it with you.
They started with Lancers and Mateus. Just to let you know, my life probably started over a bottle of Mateus, or Cold Duck.
Like any good adult of the 60s
Correct.
and 70s. But let me ask you, in your home, in your cellar, what would we find? What kind of assortment do you have?
I would say 80% of my cellar is Pinot Noir.
Domestic?
Domestic. I would say I probably have 4 bottles of Grand Cru in my cellar right now. I probably have 2 cases of Premier Cru. I probably have some good champagne. I probably have some decent bubbles. I've always got 4 or 5 bottles of good California sparkling wine in my fridge. Some Chardonnay, some white Rhones. I strongly believe that Northern white Rhone wines are probably some of my favorite wines. Love Hermitage Blanc. Love Condrieu. Love Gruyere. I mean, all that good stuff. Chardonnay to me is the greatest white wine in the world. Sorry, Riesling. I know most master sommeliers would firmly disagree with me, but I think Chardonnay can produce the greatest white wine in the world.
Well, I have a question on that. Hold that thought. Before I jump to that next question about Chardonnay or maybe something else, anything you opened recently from your cellar that tasted really good?
I've been drinking some Spanish and some Portuguese wines that were gifted to me by my friend Alex Rasan, winemaker at Metric Cellars. And
he's been a guest on Wine Soundtrack.
Mencia. His Mencia, I think the Mencia that he's bringing in is spectacular. Some of the Albariños are spectacular. I mean, if you love wines with minerality, I think for the value and sort of the cost of those wines are pretty amazing. Although I have to say probably the last 3 bottles of white wine that really blew the top of my head off, 2 were Northern Rhones with at least 5 to 7 years on them. One was actually from a white Hermitage. The other one was an older wine from Bob Lindquist from Santa Maria. And then, and I would just say that white Rhones, I just love that beeswaxy mineral character, and those white wines from Galicia.
Yeah, poor you. Like, you've drunk so much wine, you can't remember the last good one because every wine is good.
Well, I'm kind of the guy. Take this with a grain of salt. I'm kind of a guy that I had a roommate one time who told me, you know what? The piece of apple pie in front of me is always the greatest piece of apple pie I've ever had. And I thought, I want to have that attitude in my life, that anything in front of me is amazing, because it's just sort of like, what an amazing life that I'm just breathing on a planet spinning 70,000 miles around the sun, So first of all, I'm a huge optimist. I believe we're even...
Glass half full.
Absolutely. We're living in the greatest time in the history of mankind, although in a slight sort of blip
of time.
A blip of sort of a counter-enlightenment to speak. But I strongly believe when a wine's in front of me, if I'm a wine judge, I'm going to be pushing wines to go to gold, even if they're not perfect. I think a wine should be expressive, it should be beautiful, but again, and I do believe if a wine is too clean and perfect, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a wine that has character. I'm looking for a wine that speaks of place. I want a wine to be quantum. I want it to be about time and place put together in a glass.
So based on that and your waxing about Chardonnay, I'm curious, do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
Perfect variety? Well, if there is, it's either Pinot Noir or Pinot Blanc. Pinot Noir is a perfect genetic mutant in the sense that it's never static. If you look at a Pinot Noir vineyard, just like any other vineyard in the world, every shoot is genetically distinct from every other shoot in the vineyard. Vines do not replicate themselves. They do not propagate themselves perfectly, like a tomato or cannabis. There's no such thing as a clone. So when people talk about clones, it's a trope. So Pinot Noir has the greatest capacity for genetic mutation of any grape. So when I look at a Pinot Noir vineyard, what I'm seeing is a perfect reflection of change that's happening now. So because Pinot Noir mutates so quickly and Pinot Noir is always moving, that to me drives my imagination because it's not perfect. It represents nature, it represents Darwinism, it represents genetic accession, it represents all the things that are changing and freak people out. And then Pinot Blanc is a genetic accession from Pinot Noir, and it drives my imagination probably more than any white grape. And I probably drink more Pinot Blanc from, Weissburgunder from Germany, all the way to, Pinot Bianco from the Alto Adige, back to Santa Maria Valley and the J. Welch Pinot Blanc. I am absolutely fascinated right now. Pinot Blanc to me is like master sommeliers, how they look at Riesling. And we know they're freaks for Riesling. And I get it. I've had great Rieslings too, but Pinot Blanc's really important to me.
So, you're talking about all these great wines and you're making wines and you've made wine for many years. What's your opinion about wine critics and scores? Briefly.
Yes.
I know, because this one could be a long one.
Who was it? Was it Bertrand Russell who said a critic is a one-legged man trying to teach the world to run? I would say 20 years ago we needed wine criticism. And now if you're curious enough and you've got an internet connection or a phone, here's the thing. Wine critics are tools. Literally and figuratively. Some more than other. But if you find a wine critic whose palate has a lot of consistency and sympathy with yours, well, congratulations. You've just been able to remove 19 out of 20 wines that you might not love in the market. So if I loved every wine that Parker had here, let me say something nice about Robert Parker. Robert Parker has one of the most consistent palates in the world. And Robert Parker, along with another Robert, Mondavi, are the two greatest wine heroes in the United States. Mondavi got us drinking great wine, and I think Parker made us intellectualize great wine. But just the fact that I don't really agree with him stylistically would sort of I think, Robert Parker's love of over-alcoholized and heavy wines is just like, I don't know, Disney making like 101 Dalmatians. Is it their fault they made a great movie so they overbred Dalmatians and now they can't walk, see, or hear? So yes, I'm saying Disney made retarded Dalmatians the same way Parker made over-alcoholized wine because they succeeded. They succeeded in writing about the 82 Bordeaux's. They succeeded in making a great movie about spotted dogs. Everyone wanted a spotted dog. Everyone wanted the 82 Bordeaux. And when Parker came out and said, this one from Napa is spectacular and it's $60, everyone jumped in and bought it. So success succeeds. And if a critic, I tend to like Alan Meadows. I tend to like Antonio Galloni. Those are the critics that really drive. Dan Berger and I probably have the greatest palate sympathy of any critic I know. So find the critic that gives the scores or the positive reviews that speak to you and use them as a tool.
Okay.
That's what I would say about wine critics. And the 100-point wine system is kind of crazy too, but I don't think we need to get into that.
So, quick, rapid questions. Red, white, or rosé?
White.
Still or sparkling?
Sparkling. Well, gosh. Yes.
I know. You've talked about so many wines.
I'm going to say yes.
Champagne or from somewhere else?
Champagne. No, I mean, I went to Champagne for my honeymoon. There's nothing like champagne. Champagne is probably the greatest liquid on the planet Earth.
Glacial
milk will keep you alive longer, but who wants to be alive that long?
And I love your optimism about every wine you taste, because it is true. Like, there's just such an excitement. So, with the world of wines at your feet and all the great wines that you drink, how do you approach food and wine pairing? Do you follow rules? Do you think we have to follow rules? And if so, what rules do you follow?
I teach food and wine pairing at the local community college, and we start with Tim Haney's article from last year, Wine and Food Matching is BS. And I challenge my students to prove to me that food and wine pairing matters. I talked to Michael Jordan, the short white master sommelier Michael Jordan, and he says that food and wine pairing's dead. drink what you love, eat what you love, and stop worrying. I like to say for food and wine pairing, I only have really 2 rules: match the intensity of the wine to the intensity of the food, and match the level of fat in the food to the level of structure in the wine. And if you follow those 2 rules, you'll end up with Sauvignon Blanc with steak au poivre. It's gorgeous. Take chances. So what I say is I have 2 major rules: just structure to fat and intensity to intensity. And then you're an American. We fought a war to get out of Europe. Let's stop worrying about European wine rules and sommelier rules and just get a bottle of wine on the table, because wine is delicious with food and food is delicious with wine. And let's be honest, wine is food. So let's stop worrying and just, I'd say, get your drink on, get your eat on, and spend more time at table. A bottle of wine is an investment to keep the people we love at table for an extra hour every day. Slow the hell down. To our Italian friends out there, piano, piano.
Domani, domani. So, what happens when you drink a little too much wine? You got any special cures?
Yes, it's called Fernet Branca, and it is magic. If you've never had a shot or 2 of Fernet at the end of a tough night, then I kind of feel sorry for you, because it is absolute magic. Obviously, drinking 2 to 3 glasses of water with every glass of wine. Stay hydrated, and at the end of the night, a little nip of Fernet and someone you love next to you. I don't think anything could be better.
So let's focus on the J. Wilkes wine for a second,
Sure.
just in this question. For someone who hasn't tasted J. Wilkes wines, what do you think they're missing out on?
A brand that cares about place and balance, and a brand that wants to teach you about American viticultural areas. All of the wines from J. Wilkes are not vineyard designated. They're all designated by an American viticultural area: Paso Robles Highlands District, Santa Rita Hills, Santa Maria Valley. So the idea is, what other brand only does AVA designates? The idea here is, so many people jump into wine and then, just like everyone wants the Pliny the Elder, they'll go to the Bien Nacido Vineyard Designate or the Clopepi Vineyard Designate and they'll pay $60. Well, they don't even know what the AVA tastes like. Mm-hmm. So we want to put the cart sort of in back of the horse and let the horse lead you to an understanding of the places in California that make great wine. So when you're ready to spend the big bucks on vineyard designation, you have the background and the frame of reference to understand what the AVA can give. So when you go deeper, you start understanding what the site gives you. So we make wines of place, but we do not make wines of site.
And I love it because the label says wines of character, wines of place. So you answered perfectly on that one.
But the character, I should mention, the character is not me.
Mm-hmm.
The character is the dirt. And I don't really think, because I love wine and because I love viticulture and I love farming, I don't believe it's my responsibility to put or to posit my own culture or stylistic affectation on the wine. Mm-hmm. Wine's made in the vineyard, blah, blah, blah. But one thing that's lovely about these wines is you'll really never... Most of our wines are between maybe 12.5% to 14% alcohol. So I do think the alcohol does matter in the sense that we're not trying to make an over-alcoholized wine for points. We're trying to make a wine that will make people happy when they drink it and match deliciously with food and not be over the top.
Well, and not to go down too deep of a roll in this way, and I'll just end with this, but Santa Maria, cool climate, cooler climates, lower alcohol, hotter climates, just that heat.
We do make...
equates to higher alcohol in general. But let me ask you,
Sure.
If space aliens were to land on your property right in the center of, let's say, Bien Nacido Vineyard, it's a big property, so, there's lots of landing room. Which of your wines would you present to them?
2019 Pinot Blanc.
Okay.
I think it's the last Pinot Blanc I made as the winemaker for J. Wilkes specifically. And I think it took me 5 years to get it right. There's a lot of people involved in the production of that wine. I don't want anyone who's listening to go, oh yeah, he made that wine. I mean, we made that wine, right? Uh-huh. But Chris Hamill, who's the vineyard manager at Bien Nacido, just killed it. And this is 47-year-old own-rooted Pinot Blanc, mistakenly interplanted with a couple percent Melon de Bourgogne. If you haven't had a bottle of J. Wilkes Pinot Blanc, jump in, get something going, because it really, get yourself a dozen oysters, get down to Rappahannock in LA if it's open still, get yourself a couple dozen really good cold water oysters and just eat oysters and drink Pinot Blanc and realize that we are blessed to be living this life.
So you're in the vineyards. You obviously have hundreds of acres of vineyards to go through, and you spend time in the vineyard. Are you known for talking to the vines, to the grapes, or do you wait till they're in barrel? And do you ever talk to them?
I would say more than talking to the wines, I'd probably play the music. At Clopepi, they only listen to Bob Marley and the Grateful Dead. That's my wife's rule. Happy music for happy wines. I don't believe that the wines have an effect. I don't believe. I am a scientist and I am a secular humanist, and I believe strongly that wine is not a conscious being. But you could argue Pinot Noir is as damn close as you can get, and anything that you do to Pinot Noir, you could argue maybe vibrations do have an impact on Pinot Noir. It's so ephemeral. But I would say that I would be much more likely to talk to the crew around me while I'm working. I'm more likely to tell stories and to try to teach the winemakers and the interns that are working around me. I think that's fair.
Do you, in all the years you've been working, do you have any rituals that you do at the start of harvest?
I would say that my favorite ritual was when Brian Loring would pick his Pinot Noir on the 667 hill, where he got the one of the best scores he ever got from the Wine Spectator. When he started picking that wine the next year, he brought a bottle of Patron, and he would bring a bottle of Patron, and the entire crew would do a shot. Just in case OSHA's listening, I'm just kidding. But yeah, we were doing tequila shots at 3 a.m, sometimes at 9 at the evening when we were doing a night pick. So I do think that taking a shot before you start picking is a beautiful way to go. I would say, let's see, and there was a taco truck right next in Lompoc. This taco truck that did these Marte Tieta tacos, these shrimp and carne asada tacos that were the best tacos I've ever had. So I would sometimes get tacos there, and if that's a ritual, bring them back to the crew.
Nice. So you've been in this area for a long time, and I know how passionate you are about Santa Rita Hills, Santa Maria Valley. Vintage, every vintage tells a story. Do you feel that there's more variation from vintage to vintage or more similarity?
Well, so I would say 15, 16, 17, 2015, 2016, 2017, we had the hottest year, then we had the hottest year, then we had the hottest year. And so we were kind of in Santa Barbara County, we were kind of thinking, oh, goodness gracious, what's happening? Are we going to lose our cool climate nature? Are we going to start planting Cabernet in Santa Rita Hills? And then 18 came. And we went back to either an anomaly or back to sort of a cool normal. And that really was fantastic. And then 19, it happened again. And then 20, it happened again. I mean, everyone's talking about the heat and the fires and everything. 2020 was an amazingly cool vintage up here. In fact, we didn't break 90 degrees until the middle of September. Our average temperature in August is 74 degrees as a high.
Wow.
So we had a beautiful, long, cool growing season. The way I would describe in one sentence how vintage works in Santa Barbara County, Santa Maria Valley, and Santa Rita Hills specifically, long, cool growing season. One of the longest cooling growing seasons. We're growing at the 37th parallel. So our latitude is so far down, we are on the same latitude as Libya.
Wow.
But we're also right next to the Pacific Ocean, so we have this amazing cooling effect of the Pacific Ocean. So the fog, from the west, the sun from the desert fight right over our vineyards, and it's all about Pinot Noir. And she laughs as the climate fights, but it's all about that cool climate. And then around September, the warm water starts coming around Point Conception and changes our weather patterns, and then we start getting 80s and 90s through September and October. So I would say cool climate region through summer, 70s all summer long, and then little heat spikes in the high 80s and 90s, sometimes up to 100 in September, October,
right when you're
to
peaking.
Punctuate the vineyard. So is it going to be like 2008 where we never got the heat? So it's sort of like comma, comma, comma. It's going to be like 2010 where it got 115 degrees and stuck there for 10 days, exclamation point. Or like this year, just a period. This is what we're used to. Long, cool growing season punctuated by heat spikes. And we've had 3 heat spikes for a couple days where it got into the 90s. Perfect to get us to where we need to be.
Are there any omens, signs, not necessarily negative, that help you predict what a vintage is going to bring you? Or is there not one thing?
In Santa Barbara County, the omen is, first of all, seeing if you see a bunch of, if you're not paying attention to the weather, you might see in August, September, specifically September and October, a bunch of tarantulas walking around. And if the tarantulas are walking around in mass, that means we're going to have a serious rain event. And if we're going to have a serious rain event, which might just be a half an inch, which knocks down the dust, 3 days after the rain event, we are going to have a serious heat spike. So if it rains before harvest, a lot of young winemakers start pulling fruit out of the field as quick as they can because they know here comes the heat, even if we're not ready for it. So I would say, to us, the one thing we have, because we don't really have frost, so much late in the season. We don't have hail. We don't have rain. We don't have all these horrible things that happen in other continental areas, and especially in the EU. What we have is these heat spikes. And what you find is the young winemakers want to pull the wine out of the field before the heat spikes affect the vintage. The more seasoned winemakers know to turn the water on and be patient. And then, really the masters know exactly the moment. So when I was growing at Clopepi, I had Ken Brown, I had Adam Tolmack, I had Greg Brewer deciding when they were going to pull their fruit. And I would just use their decisions to gauge what kind of style and ripeness that I wanted in the wines, which just made my job all that easier. So that's kind of as far as rituals.
The tarantulas. Oof.
The tarantulas,
omens.
baby.
Ugh. So when you were a little boy, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a hermit who lived in a little hovel in the desert and wrote poetry. That's honestly what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a hermit.
Wow. Okay. So when you're not working, what do you do in your free time?
I play a lot of disc golf. I play video games on my computer sometimes, but I mean, the main thing I do during lockdown, I just got diagnosed 2 years ago with type 1 diabetes, which really gave me a huge, like my pancreas just stopped working, and now I'm insulin-dependent diabetic, which is pretty rare this late in life. So it's really given me the opportunity. The last 7 months, my wife has taken us and decided she's going to be my personal trainer, and we've been working out a lot. So I'm probably as fit as I've ever been in my life, which I have to give my wife credit for, because I'm feeling really, really good about my fitness right now. And one reason why I love to work out so much is I love to go out and throw frisbees at chain baskets playing frisbee golf. I play ball golf once a week, and I play frisbee golf about 3 to 4 times a week. Anytime I can get out, it's my favorite thing to do. It's absolutely fantastic.
So it's a frisbee and golf and running around. I'm sorry to hear about the diabetes, but I'm glad you're managing it. I'm sure that makes it difficult with the sugar that's in wine.
There is no sugar in wine.
That's right.
Wine is that's the yeast.
I know there's no sugar in wine. This is why I like to tell people that properly made wines don't have sugar in them.
It's keto, baby. And the yeast have taken care of it. The yeast through glycolysis have changed all that sugar basically into ethanol and other things. But the greatest thing, if I'm going to drink beer, I have to take insulin. But white liquor, brown liquor, and wine just don't affect me.
That's great.
And another reason to drink Fernet Branca, because other Amaros are sweet. Fernet Branca is bone dry.
Huh. Well, since you can drink wine and you don't have to worry, when you're planning a romantic evening, what sort of wines get opened?
Well, I mean, my wife is a self-avowed bubble slut.
Okay.
She can say no to anything and anyone except a bottle of bubbles. She also has some medical issues and she can't always drink, but if she can, I think champagne, sparkling wine, bubbles are always a good call because they're going to be low alcohol, so she can drink some without getting a headache or triggering a migraine. And I just find that a bottle of bubbles is really easy to get through. And it's like a resurrection we can all agree on and all believe in. It's just absolutely beautiful.
It's sexy, it's sensual, it's celebratory, it's happy, it's everything.
Yeah, it's like what do they say? It's like people say, I don't have the celebration to drink bubbles, and of course, the bubbles themselves is a celebration, and getting through a day is a celebration.
Yeah. So complete this sentence for me. A table without wine is like.
A day without love. I mean...
It makes perfect sense.
Like salt and pepper. I mean, it's not that hard. Just put it on the table. I mean, I come from a family of teetotalers. My grandmother and my great-grandmother was in the Women's Christian Temperance Union and helped get, the 19th Amendment.
Wow.
So that's horrible. But
you made up for it.
I made up for it.
So... You've told me a lot of great things that people have told you. I mean, you've kind of peppered it in this conversation, but is there a piece of advice that you kind of live by, something someone once told you, whether it's how you work or how you live or how you make wine. Is there a piece of advice, and who gave it to you?
I would say I'd look at both my grandparents. I would look at grandfathers. My grandfather on my dad's side was a businessman and a kind of a numbers guy and a sort of and my grandfather on my mom's side was a Presbyterian minister, and he lived his life as a hyper Christian, hyper moral human being. But beyond that, he was a good man, a really good man that I could talk to, and he took me fishing and taught me to fly fish. And it wasn't anything he ever told me. Mm-hmm. It was the example that he led by, and his intensity led to his kids being, a Supreme Court clerk and a senior partner at the largest law firm in the United States. Every kid that came out of that family really succeeded. So the success that he demanded got to me and made me feel if I wasn't an industry leader, I was a failure. Mm-hmm. So that drove me. And then my other grandfather, who was the most kind, gentle, quiet, low key, but the kindness just came out of him, his eyes, everything about him. And everyone who ever knew him said, Ben Hagen was just a mensch. He was just a wonderful human being. So I like to think of sort of the humanism of Ben Hagen and the intensity of Hugh David Burcham drive me. Those are sort of the two parts. And, my grandmothers were amazing too, but I think, and they were both World War II veterans. So
I like that. So a strong work ethic and a kindness. So there you go.
Yeah.
If you could offer a piece of advice to our listeners, what would you tell them?
Get to table, bring delicious things, make sure someone you love is there. And if you put together time, food, and love, and then in the middle, fill it with wine, there's nothing that can be better than that. Nothing. I mean, there's stuff,
there's some things, but no, we'll leave it at that.
Those are the greatest moments you might spend, sober or with our clothes on. But just the idea of engaging in that, what I like to call the Athenian level of intoxication, which means spending 3 or 4 hours drinking, but never being drunk. 3 or 4 hours drinking, but never yelling at someone, never raising your voice, but to have that moment where you hear the sound. Every wine tasting, every wine dinner you've ever been to, there's a moment when the sound comes. And it's that sound of people losing their inhibitions, and it's that laughter. It happens at every tasting and every place where wine is served. Mm-hmm. That's the moment. And that's the moment that, that Muhammad came into a wedding and saw the people drinking and said, this is a blessing. Then he came back later and they were all bloodied and drunk on the ground and said, no Muslim will ever drink wine again.
So don't take it too far. Just go to that moment.
It's the moment. It's the moment of where we're all... We wake to our potential as human beings. We wake to our potential as kindness, and we have these conversations that just come out of us. And in a perfect situation, we listen to each other, we respond, we have that sort of Socratic moment of understanding. And if we can understand what's coming from another person's brain by virtue of their words, and it helps us putting some of this fermented grape juice in our belly, wine is a blessing. Wine is a beautiful thing.
Well, when you look back at your career only, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date? Because I know you said there are a couple things I would think of, but I'm curious what you think are your proudest achievements.
Approval of the Santa Rita Hills American Viticultural Area. It was my first AVA. I've written 4 AVAs that have been approved, and the Santa Rita Hills, it was a volunteer thing. I stepped up as a rookie to carry bags like a hockey rookie. I stood up and said, I'm willing. You guys don't know who I am. You don't know what I can do, but I'm going to step up and put in 100 hours of work at least to get this AVA done right. And I don't know. The last one felt pretty good too, because I got paid a hell of a lot more money for it. But I would say that the Santa Rita Hills thing, because it was volunteer, because it was my first AVA, and because it was approved, and then watching it thrive.
Yeah, to a world-class region.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
And so you've written 4. So what are your 4 AVAs that you've written?
So Santa Rita Hills first, and then we did Happy Canyon, then we did Ballard Canyon, and just about last month, we got approval for Elisa's Canyon. So there's 7 AVAs in Santa Barbara County, and I've written 4 of them.
Congratulations.
Well, hopefully in 100 years, someone will look back at it and say, sort of, you were, I don't know why John Bonham all of a sudden started playing Moby Dick. That in 100 years from now, the boundaries are going to change. I just hope that the boundaries that I helped research will be seen as competent at worst and prescient at best. Yeah.
So we're sitting at your dining room table, and we have some bottles of wine on the table, some J. Wilkes wines. Of course, 2019 and older, so wines you made. And I'm looking out a window, and I imagine if the paparazzi were standing out there taking pictures, because they were really excited who was joining us at this table. Who, from any walk of life, living or deceased, would you want to be at this table drinking J. Wilkes wine with you?
There's no doubt in my mind it would be Oscar Wilde.
I love it.
First of all, I appreciate his bravery. I mean, man went to do heavy labor for his sexual orientation. He was a fantastic poet. He wrote one of my favorite plays, The Importance of Being Earnest. He wrote one of my favorite novels, Picture of Dorian Gray. He was an absolute raconteur. I like to think of myself on a good night as a raconteur. And during the salons of 19th century London, when he was about to say something, T.S. Eliot and all the British modernists would shut the hell up, get their pen out, put it on paper, and when Oscar said something, they'd write it down because he only spoke in perfect sentences and perfect aphorisms.
Wow.
And I'd love to hear what he had to say about what I do.
So if you had to go to a deserted island, what 3 wines would you take with you? 3 wines.
Do I have refrigeration?
You do.
Oh, cool. I guess I'm drinking like Mesnil,
Okay.
champagne. I guess I would be drinking... Screw it, Romani Conti. I was going to say La Tâche just to sound like Romani, but Romani Conti, I think, has blown my mind many times. And then
The fact that you can say that it's blown your mind many times, not many people can say that.
And gosh darn it, just to have something totally different. I'm thinking about what I'm going to be eating there, but let's just forget that. Let's just say a really nice Jabelet Hermitage Blanc, because I think white Rhone just drives my imagination. I think it's one of the sexiest wines in the world. So I'd have my bubbles for elegance. I'd have my Romani Conti for meats, and I would have something with a little beeswax and complexity. I'm a little surprised I'm going with white Rhone, but I've just fallen in love with them in the last 10 years.
Well, so we're almost to the end here, and now we're going to play the little game where we pair wine and music. So you've talked about a lot of different wines. So I want you to just tell me what kind of genre, a specific song, anything coming up with. So I want to go back to your very first, I don't know if you can remember this, but your 71...
72. Chapelle Chambertin.
No, your first wine when you were 9 years old.
Oh, yes, you're right. It was
71.
Oh, my goodness.
I was listening.
Maybe it would be like video game music of like, maybe it would be like the sound of Space Invaders. Boom, 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 boom. Because that's the only reason I was doing the dishes is to go down and play video games.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. It was
in
a time and place.
In 1971, though, I mean, or back then, I guess this would have been 78. I was listening to really early Oingo Boingo. I was listening to Kiss, rock and roll over, and I was probably listening to Steely Dan, Asia. So that would have been Beach Boys and
one song.
How about?
Okay, we'll move on. How about this?
Yes.
This J. Wilkes Blanc de Blanc from Santa Maria Valley, 2016.
Nice acidity, crisp and bright, sort of summer in a glass, sunny, beautiful. Probably, I'm just going to probably listen to Beach Boys' Pet Sounds.
Okay. What about this lovely rosé? Again, Paso Robles, 2019. What's the grape makeup of this?
It's mostly Grenache with a little bit of Syrah and a touch of Chardonnay.
Ooh.
Very, very balanced, crisp and bright. I've been listening a lot to a Grateful Dead show from May 14th, 1978 from Providence, Rhode Island. And it is so crisp and bright, but it is so slow and perfectly... what's the word? every moment is important and they slow down. It's not about how fast they play or how energetic they play. Every note is conscious and every note is specific. I'm just going to go 514-78.
Okay, and then we have the 2019 Cabernet Franc here, the J. Wilkes.
Let's go. I've been reading a lot of Tom Morello, guitarist for Rage Against the Machine, who I got to see live with Bruce Springsteen, and he absolutely blew my mind. Politically, he and I agree completely. He's been saying some very, very interesting things. I'm going to go with something completely different than what I've said, just to show I'm not just a hippie. I'm just going to say Rage Against the Machine's first album, and maybe the song that would say, F you, I won't do what you tell me. There's something about this wine. It's not Cabernet Sauvignon. We're making Cabernet Franc, and making a Cabernet Franc is a little movement against the normal behavior. So this is a little bit of a rebel wine, and I think the greatest rebel song of my life was probably coming out of that first Rage Against the Machine album, which I still think stands up beautifully. And Tom Morello's guitar. I mean, how many rap albums have a guy playing guitar who's basically approximating a DJ?
Okay, one last wine. You said that after 5 years of working at it, your 2019 Pinot Blanc was sort of your pinnacle Pinot Blanc.
Crisp. Yes, you know what it is. It's a Mediterranean Sunrise from the album, which is called A Friday Night in San Francisco. Al Di Meola, Paco de Lucia, and Mahavishnu John McLaughlin playing Spanish guitars. And it is the finest example of acoustic classical guitar I've ever heard. It's about a 10-minute song. And if you listen to it and it doesn't bring you to tears by its quality, it is crisp, it is bright, it is perfect. And that's where I would go with that.
Fantastic. Okay, I've got one last question. Sure. Simple answer. What wine region is at the top of your bucket list to explore?
Alto Adige.
Oh.
Because Lagrein, I make Lagrein. We make Lagrein at the Miller Family Wine Company. It's probably the greatest expression outside of Alsace. It's probably a Pinot Blanc or Pinot Bianco. And you can just go north and decide whether to be in Switzerland or Liechtenstein. And yes, I said Liechtenstein in the middle of it. So I would say I've never been to the Alto Adige. I've never been to the Subtirol. Furthest north I've ever been is probably up,
Veneto?
Maybe just a little bit north of that.
Okay, so Alto Adige is on your bucket list. For somebody who might have this area on their bucket list to come up to Santa Barbara wine country and to understand, like you said, there are how many sub-AVAs? There's Santa Rita Valley, there's Santa Rita Hills, there's a lot of sub-AVAs. You have a lot of wines under Miller Wine Company. Bien Nacido Vineyard is a vineyard. It's not open to the public.
Correct.
Does J. Wilkes Wines have a tasting room?
We do. We're in downtown Santa Barbara at 35 State Street, steps off the beach.
Very convenient.
I mean, literally, it probably is one of the closest tasting rooms to the Pacific Ocean in the world, which is perfectly because Jeff Wilkes was a sailor. He loved the ocean. It's just perfect and will take incredibly good care of you. I would invite anyone coming to Santa Maria Valley to take me up on this offer of sending me an email or getting in touch with me either by social media or directly by email. And I will I will be the Julie McCoy, cruise director of your Santa Barbara experience. We are not Napa, we're not Sonoma, but we're going to try 3 times as hard to give you the experience. So I would love to give you 3 or 4 places to visit, maybe even find a time to get down and either, FaceTime in if I can't come in person, but meet you down in Santa Barbara, taste some wines with you. Santa Barbara is one of the greatest food towns in California, and Santa Barbara wine. If you don't know Santa Barbara wine, you're really missing out because as far as value, expressiveness, balance, elegance, deliciousness, complexity, it's hard to beat Santa Barbara. And once you're into it, there's a reason why geeks really love this place. And we're still waiting to become extremely popular. Sideways did for Santa Barbara wine what the Soviet Union did for socialism. We went from feudalism to postmodernism without a lot of work in between. But we're working harder, and we really want to see people up here. Put me to the test, and I'll show you just how hard we'll work to give you the greatest wine experience of your life.
I love it. Well, Wes, thank you. This is definitely a destination I love coming to. I recommend everyone. It's an easy drive up the coast from Los Angeles, so you can fly into LA and come on up. You can fly into Santa Barbara. They have a small airport. But this is a wonderful region. You've made it easy by having a tasting room downtown, but come into wine country and take Wes up on that offer, because if you can even get him to guide you, you will have a wonderful experience. So thank you for joining us, and cheers.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.